to Couch Potato Diary as we wrap up our NHL previews. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in on this holiday Monday. Rate, review, subscribe wherever you can. If you're listening, if you're watching, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. All that stuff really does help. I didn't say it in the Sunday one. I meant to. A huge thank you to everyone who came out to Wild Rose Wrestling at the Legion in the Northeast here in Calgary this weekend. Everyone was super nice to me. Everyone made my job very easy. Apparently they liked me, so that was very, very nice. But the wrestling was phenomenal. The Brickhouse Camille is as intimidating in person as she is on television, but some really, really good wrestling happening over the weekend. Like Taylor Rising was phenomenal. Kat Von Hees, who's a friend of the show, is always delivers. And yeah, everyone, like I'm singling out a couple I shouldn't be, because literally every performer on the card was really, really, really good. So shout outs to everyone with Wild Rose Wrestling. Today, as my cat walks in front of me here, I guess you didn't see the tail, so probably could have avoided that. But we are wrapping up our NHL previews. Eastern Conference win totals on this one, and then a part 2 with Western Conference win totals and Super Bowl Stanley Cup predictions. So that's what's coming up. If you're looking for NFL stuff, that's going to be on the show on Tuesday. Thank you all so much. And yeah, no stretch to say we're about to get into it. It's time for our NHL preview. All right, apparently Bailey had some thoughts on the Eastern Conference, so we are going to get into it. We start with the Boston Bruins. Off-season of change, not much of it positive for them, I would say. Their over-under sits at 100.5 points. If you will recall, they set the regular season record for wins in a season. They were very, very good all year, but ran out of steam at the end. And now Patrice Bergeron is gone, as is David Krejci. Milan Lucic is back. But I don't see how this Boston Bruins team doesn't take a gigantic step back this upcoming season. They were going to anyway. Felt pretty, if you would have set the total at over under 130 points, feel pretty good I would have taken the under on that one. Like, there was just obvious regression that was going to be baked in. So let's say they would have dropped to even just 120 points. If we're using hockey or baseball WAR, let's say Patrice Bergeron is worth 6-7 wins. So there's 12 to 14 points. And then David Krejci, maybe a 3-4 win player. So there's 6 to 8 points. You're starting to see how I'm going to get to Bailey wants to leave. All right, you can see how we can get to the over-under, to get to be under 100 points there. So I feel like this team is really exposed up the middle. Zacha and Coyle as your number 1 and number 2 centers just don't strike the fear into anyone, especially in a division that features Matthews and Tavares and maybe Nylander at center, and everyone that Tampa Bay has going out there. It is not good enough down the middle, so I just don't see how Boston comes away with over 100 points this season. I'm going under on the Boston Bruins. The Buffalo Sabres, their win total is at 92.5. This is a team that everyone is expecting to take a big step forward this upcoming season. I like this group. I don't love this group. I think that there's a lot of hype being built in and a lot of assumptions being made. Tage Thompson is phenomenal. Skinner's good. I like Tuck is someone who I have all the time in the world for. The rest of the forwards are just kind of okay. Cousins, Middlestead, maybe there's another step that gets taken there. On the blue line, I think we've just scratched the surface of Rasmus Dahlin. Owen Power should be a big step, and so there's potential that you're going to have to, for 45 minutes a night, play one of those two guys. But the rest of the group is okay. And between the pipes, I think there's a lot of people assuming that Levi is going to take a step forward. There's just a lot of, if you're going over the 92.5, it feels like you're going the best case scenario, right? Which I guess is obvious if you're going under or over on any of these. But there's absolutely no risk being built into that. So I just think they're being a touch overvalued. I think this is kind of the number they get to next year. But I'm going under 92.5. For the Buffalo Sabres. The Carolina Hurricanes. I've been watching football all day. I'm taping this on Sunday night. So if I miss a catastrophic injury by the time this podcast comes out, my bad. But the Carolina Hurricanes coming in at 107.5 points. This is, I did the most talented team thing on the show that you heard on Sunday. This is the most talented team in the NHL. They are incredibly deep with high-end talent. That it, like, oh yeah, this team's got good depth. This team has good star depth, which is scary to think about. The only question is in goal, but like at the forward group, like Aho, Svechnikov, a little banged up, but still, Teravainen, like you go up and down this lineup. Jarvis is a player that everyone's excited about. Like, you just go up and down this lineup. On the blue line with Slavin and Burns and Shea and Pesci. They bring in Orlov, who's really good. And D'Angelo, who I certainly wouldn't host a podcast with. And that is the one concern, is that he has been a distraction everywhere he goes. Doesn't seem like a great dude, but they brought him in. So, that's kind of the one blemish you see on this roster. But man, this is just a really, really good hockey team. It's a high number, and I think they go higher. I'm going over 107.5 points for Carolina. Columbus Blue Jackets, 73.5 points. Not a whole lot to say here. They suck. They have Gaudreau. They have Patrick Laine. Fantilli could be something. Maybe not this year. They bring in Provorov, who's not an awesome dude. Like Severson and Werenski on the blue line are fine. The goaltending, I think, is an issue. That there's a couple guys on this team I like. Like I said, Gaudreau and Laine are good. We'll see what Fantilli is. Jenner's fine, Texier is fine, or Teixeira or whatever. Like they got a few guys who are, they're fine, but it's just not a good hockey team. A lot of distractions coming into the season, obviously. I'm going under 73.5 points. I think this is going to be, again, one of the worst teams in the NHL. Detroit Red Wings, total sits at 85.5. I like this team. I think the addition of DeBrincat is going to be a big boost for this club. Now, this is the second year in a row. I've said this about a young up-and-coming team, adding Alex DeBrincat, but I think he provides a desperately needed scoring punch to this top six, and now you look at how the whole team stacks up. I like them a lot. I'd prefer one more big center in there. JT Compher is fine, but he's more a guy I would prefer as a third center if I'm going to take this team to make a run in a very competitive East Division. But this roster is good, and I think good enough that they're going to make some noise this year. I have Detroit going over 85.5. The Florida Panthers, I have them under 98.5. They're banged up right now on the blue line. Ekblad and Montour are hurt right now. They knew that was going to happen coming into the season, so they go out and make a move, bring in Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They re-sign a bunch of dudes. The forward group is extremely talented, and we saw in the postseason they're starting to come together. So this is one I definitely don't love this prediction, and certainly one when we do our accountability episode at the beginning of next season, I might look like a gigantic idiot, but I am going under 98.5 on the Florida Panthers. Notebook. Montreal Canadiens. I'm going over 71.5 on Montreal. 71.5 is really, really low. And I think that this is a year where we see a lot out of Cole Caulfield. They got a ton from Sean Monahan last season when healthy. I think Kirby Dach has a chance to do some fun things. We'll see what Slavkovsky looks like in his second year. But I think the addition of Alex Newhook gives them a really nice punch up the middle with Suzuki, Doc, Newhook, and Evans. And that's how you build winners in the NHL, is down the middle. I think they've done that. They have some fun complementary pieces on the wing. Defensively, it's not awesome. And so that is certainly where this team is going to lack. Look, I don't think they're going to compete for a playoff spot at all, but I think they're going to go over 71.5 points. I think they'll be a bit better than that. The New Jersey Devils. I have this team as one of the most talented teams in the NHL. They were number 2 on my rankings. This team is just fucking good, man. Like, this top 6 of Toffoli, Hughes, and Bratt, who the fan base surrounding him is kind of gross, but he's great. He's sure up there. Meyer is a player who I've long really liked. Palat on your third line with Holla. That line is going to fly. McLeod and Nosek on the fourth with Lazar. I love that. And then the blue line, it's the whole team so deep, and goaltending, I think they're all right. There just isn't a real weakness with this club. I like what they have built in New Jersey. I think they are going to be one of the better teams in the NHL this season. So I'm going over 105.5 for the Devils. The New York Islanders, a full season with Bo Horvat on the roster as they sign him to a gigantic contract extension, and just some pieces you like, right? Like, they brought in Pajot a couple of years ago. He's good. Horvat with Barzell, a full year of them, I think is going to be really fun. Engvall, the contract is weird, but I think he'll be good out on Long Island. Defensively, I think this team is really strong, and they have a very good 1-2 punch between the pipes. I think this is just a good hockey team. I think they go over 91.5. Not by a ton, but I think they go over 91.5. Rangers 101.5. I will fully admit I have a blind spot when it comes to the Rangers. I think hockey is more fun when they're good. They just have so many pieces that I like. I love Zibanejad, love Panarin and what he can do out on the ice. Hedl is always someone I've had a soft spot for. Trocheck, I think, is one of the more underrated players in the league defensively. I think Fox is the best defenseman in the league. Miller and Trouba as a second pairing is really good. And Shesterkin still has the potential to be the best goalie in the world. So I think that this is a Rangers team that's going to be very competitive this year. I'm going over 101.5 points for the Rangers. The Ottawa Senators. It was a season of hope last year that got dashed very quickly. Failing to reach expectations for sure. Now, DJ Smith and company have some expectations to reach again. Out is DeBrincat. In is Kubalik and Vlad Tarasenko. Out is right now Shane Pinto, and in are gigantic cap issues in Ottawa. I just feel like this team is so up against it that like it feels like they're going to have to do some gymnastics all season long to try to put a competitive roster out there. Like I like a bunch of the players, right? Like Giroux had a really good year last year. Brady Tkachuk is a culture changer. Stützle feels like he is on the verge of like superstardom. The main concern for me is the horse of Norris. The health of Norris. He down the middle is so important to this team. When they have him, this team looks pretty solid down the middle. It's what Peter Labardius has talked about on Calgary radio for a long time, right? It's how they slot. They slot perfectly when Norris is out there as the number 2 center, and that ends up being one of the better 1-2 punches down the middle in the National Hockey League. When he's out, then all of a sudden, Greg, who's a fine third-line center, is now one of the worst second-line centers in the league. And Kastelik moves up to a third-line role it just feels like it's a bit beyond him at this point. So that so much is banking on the health of Norris, and if anything happens, they have zero cap space to be able to solve it. They're probably going to have to move a pretty good player off of their roster to make an addition happen. So I just feel like it's going to be a bit of a challenge all year long. But I do like a bunch of the pieces on this team. I'm going under 91.5, but I'm just slightly under 91.5 for Ottawa. Philadelphia Flyers here. I think if you can find a prop bet to see who's the worst team in the league, I think the Flyers would be an interesting value. Their total is set at 75.5. I think that this is a team that could just be selling off pieces by the deadline. I think this is one of the worst rosters in the NHL. They have a couple pieces that you like: Couturier, Lawton, Konechny, Atkinson still at times, but yeah, this is not a good hockey team, and I think they get just absolutely boat raced in the Eastern Conference this season. Coming down the stretch, the Pittsburgh Penguins. I said before, in the more overvalued teams in the league, I don't know what people are seeing with Pittsburgh. This was a team that kind of stumbled last year. They go out and add Erik Karlsson, but banking on Erik Karlsson being that dude is, I think, a fool's errand. There's too many question marks for me on this team. Outside of the top 6, I don't love the forward group. And outside of Letang and Karlsson, who, even that, like, I just think you are asking for best case scenario from everybody if this team's going to make another run to the postseason here with Sidney Crosby. So I'm going under 96.5 points for the Penguins. The Tampa Bay Lightning, I am going under 96.5 points, specifically because Vasilevsky is hurt for the first couple months of the season. I think this is still a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to have a very, like a crazy high point total this year due to the issues they're going to have between the pipes. But like, when healthy, this team is one of the best in the league. It's just they're not right now. The Toronto Maple Leafs, I have them over 106.5 points. We just went through it. Tampa Bay banged up between the pipes. Florida banged up on the blue line. The Boston Bruins weak down the middle. The Toronto Maple Leafs, this is the time for them to shine in the regular season, at least. I think that this is a Leafs team that they've added some sandpaper. I think a lot of it is needed. I think they've added some pretty strong depth to the forward group. I think a full season in the NHL for Nyes is going to be really interesting out in Toronto. That this is just a super talented hockey team. This is the most comfortable I felt about their goaltending situation in a long time. I just like a lot of what Toronto has built, so I think they go over 106.5 points. Lastly, the Washington Capitals. I'm going over 91.5. The big one for me is if they can get Kuznetsov on board. Apparently he wants out of Washington. If he stays, this team is all right down the middle. They're fine defensively. I like Mantha with Backstrom and Ovechkin. Milano, Kuznetsov, and Wilson is a fine second line. I feel like that this is a Washington group that is going to surprise some people this season. So I'm going over 91.5 on Washington. So, if you couldn't keep track of all of that, here is how the standings in my world shake out. The Toronto Maple Leafs at over 106.5 points would be in first in the Atlantic. The other two teams in the Atlantic Division that make the playoffs would be Tampa Bay and Florida. I do have Boston making the playoffs, even at under 100.5 points. The rest of the division does not make the playoffs. Detroit is out, even though they're over 85.5 points. Ottawa, Buffalo, and Montreal round out a very difficult Atlantic division. In the Metropolitan Division, Carolina finishes first, followed closely by New Jersey. I have the Rangers finishing third, even at over 101.5 points. I have the Rangers finishing third. The Washington Capitals do make the playoffs coming out of the Metropolitan Division. The Islanders do just miss, even though I have them going over 91.5 points. So then the rest of the division is the Islanders, then Pittsburgh, Philly, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. So my playoffs would stack up as first round, it would be Toronto against Washington, Carolina against Boston, Tampa Bay against Florida, and the Devils against the Rangers. Advancing from those would be Toronto taking on Florida and Carolina taking on the New Jersey Devils. Out of that, a little chalky, but I'm going Carolina against Toronto in the Eastern Conference Final, with which you would crown an Eastern Conference champion of the Carolina Hurricanes. So that is how I see the Eastern Conference stacking up. What about the West? Well, let's find out. Part 2 of this Monday episode should be out right now, so go check that out. It should be up on podcast form, so like this video, comment anything you agree or disagree with, like the video, subscribe to the channel, all of those things. Podcast form, rate, review, subscribe wherever you can. Go check out part 2. Check me out on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I am at Primetime Klein, twitch.tv/primetimepk, and you can email this show, couchpotatodiary@yahoo.com. Also, search for us on Facebook. That's going to do it. See you guys in part 2. I'm out.